Executive Director of Mentor New York. We serve the state of New York and work with over 600 programs around New York State that serve 60,000 young people. I've been working in the mentoring world for 21 years, and we've been creating mentoring programs in schools for at least 18 years, and we're pleased to share some of the strategies that these schools have had about success. You should know I love training mentors. I've trained nearly 14,000 in my career, and I've been a mentor in a school-based program with a girl. When I started with her, she was in first grade, and we were together until 10th grade when she got too busy with her schoolwork to see me every week, which is a good thing. So we're delighted to talk to you about what we know about school-based mentoring. And let me just quickly go over the agenda. Next slide, please, that we're going to cover today. In the next slide, you'll see in the agenda, we're doing the introductions right now, and then we're actually going to have an icebreaker, which is a little unusual since it'll be a virtual icebreaker. We are going to talk about the elements of effective practice for mentoring and what that means in terms of making sure that you have all the tools in place to get the best outcomes that you want for young people. We're going to cover school-based mentoring approaches because there are a couple of different ways to do it. We're going to talk about best practices around matching and some of the activities that go along to promote matches. We'll talk about how to get those matches started. Initiating matches is always an unnerving place for mentors and mentees to be because it means meeting new people, but there are lots of things to do to make that go more smoothly. We'll leave time for questions, and we're going to talk about additional resources and then some reminders about future webinars. I'll just remind you, if you're going to ask questions and make comments, to please use the drop-down box and direct them to Delia. She's going to be curating those to make sure that we hear what your questions and comments are. So next slide, please. So let's go on and talk about our icebreaker. And I'm going to set this up by telling you that the research tells us that there are two things that are very good predictors about the power of mentoring. One is that longer is stronger, meaning the longer the mentoring match lasts, the more of a positive impact the mentor has on that young person. It just makes sense, but luckily the research confirms it. But the second thing is the strength of the friendship predicts the power that that match is going to have. So getting a friendship started means figuring out what kids want to talk about that you can talk about with them. So we're going to ask you to use your drop-down box and post for us in the chat box what were some of the things you liked to talk about when you were a kid. So go ahead, be as, if it's ice cream, lima beans, the Knicks, the Yankees, whatever you'd like, tell us what did you like to talk about when you were a kid. Remember, direct those comments to Delia, and she's going to keep us going with them.
Yep, I'm going to be taking a look and seeing everyone's responses. And in the meantime, Jean, I just have a question for you. Have you ever met a kid who was interested in talking about lima beans? Is that based on a true story?
It is, because we actually have a worksheet for mentors and mentees who are getting to know each other, and we ask them their favorite things, and we ask them things they hate. And lima beans, you'd be surprised, comes up all the time as things kids hate. And me too. I hate lima beans. So it does come up. Well, I'll save it for the end. So you'll be surprised what things you can figure out to talk about, even if it's some vegetable you don't like.
Sounds great. So let's give everyone another minute or so to jump in, and please don't be shy. We do have a small group today, so we are hoping that you all will participate this way, and we are getting a couple of responses. So we have someone sharing that they liked out-of-school activities, for example, gymnastics, so sports being one of those. Another person jumped in to say, I like to talk about crafts, sports, and food.
Okay, excellent. So let's just give it one more minute and see if there are any others.
You have another response. Pets, animals, pets.
Ah, yes. No lima beans, though, I take it.
Lima beans yet. It looks like that's it for now.
Okay. So this is actually a good reminder for us as people running programs, in that we have to make sure that mentors who come to this with a good heart and really want to have a positive impact on young people can rush in thinking, well, I'm going to talk about their career choices and the values of staying in school and ethics, and that's actually kind of a hard way to begin a relationship with a young person, and it's much more beneficial to begin with things that kids like to talk about and adults find easy to talk about. And it's not wasted, because I just told you the research says the strength of the friendship, the strength of the relationship is actually how we're going to measure how successful mentors can be in making a positive impact. So this is an important part about establishing a good relationship and a good match, is to actually find things to talk about. They don't have to be important and deep things. They have to be things so that the student's talking and the mentor's listening and they're having a dialogue. So anybody else add anything else you want to add there?
Nope, that's it for now, but folks will continue to chime in if they have responses.
Okay, so can we go to the next slide, please? I touched briefly on the fact that we're going to be basing all the work that we're doing in this webinar and the others in the series around the elements of effective practice for mentoring. The elements of effective practice for mentoring were created 26 years ago by a blue ribbon panel of mentoring experts, educators, mentoring practitioners, research scientists about what makes the outcomes effective for mentoring and also keeps kids safe. So over the years, as there's new research and new findings, Mentor pulls together another panel and they update what the research says with descriptions of what are the best practices with evidence, benchmarks behind it. They just released in 2015 the 4th edition of the Elements of Effective Practice, and obviously there are things in there now that didn't exist 25 years ago, for example, e-mentoring and virtual mentoring and those kinds of things. All the work that we're talking about in our next set of webinars, and in fact all the work that Mentor, the National Mentoring Partnership, and its affiliates work towards is to implement these evidence-based standards to create safe and successful mentoring across the country. There are 6 evidence-based standards, and you see that the key areas here: recruitment, screening, training, matching and initiation, monitoring and support, and closure. This is the backbone of the technical assistance that we provide, both Mentor and the affiliates. And we're going to talk about resources at the end of this because there's so much there that the programs and schools can take advantage of. Today we're going to talk about matching and initiation. Tomorrow's webinar will be focusing on monitoring and support, which is another essential area. We picked matching and initiation because it's not something that programs necessarily ask about in the beginning about what they're going to do, but very quickly they wish they had asked the question. So we're preempting it and giving you some things to think about as you go forward. Okay, so let's move to the next slide. And I'm going to talk about mentoring in schools. So as you heard in my intro from my bio, we've been putting mentoring directly into schools for many, many years. And we've done that with traditional mentoring models, which means that typically the student sees the mentor 1 time a week. Many times it's a person who comes from the outside, and it's therefore 1 hour a week, which brings us to 4 to 6 hours a month of mentoring time, which is one of the best practices in terms of successful mentoring, that the student gets to see the mentor 4 to 6 hours a month. It's a one-to-one relationship, and it's ongoing. It carries on from year to year. And it's not unusual for people like me. I'm not Mother Teresa, but I had that same mentee for 10 years as she went from elementary school to middle school to high school. That's the traditional model. Now, one of the things that we've seen for success mentors is that we can focus on a particular area of the relationship to school and put an intensive effort towards it. Success mentoring focuses on attendance. And it's slightly different than the traditional model in that because they're choosing young people to be in the program who may have spotty attendance, they need to have more frequent interactions between the mentor and mentee. Because if it were only on Thursdays and my mentee is absent half the time, there's a good chance I'll miss her on Thursday. But if she has an opportunity to see her mentor several times during the week, even if it's for a shorter time, she begins to realize that somebody at school knows that she's not there, misses her on the days she's not there. And that those kinds of frequent interactions help build a more substantial connection with school and engagement with school. This has been researched, and I was lucky enough to be part of the initial program that the New York City Department of Education instituted to fight chronic absenteeism, and we were quite pleased and surprised to see how successful it was to make this work. One of the things that's very important about success mentors and that particular model, besides the importance of frequent interactions, is to make sure that there are natural connections and proximity. So one of the reasons that the success mentors often use teachers and staff in a school is because they're there. So the security guard who is there and says good morning to every student as they come in might find there's a particular student who lingers to say hello to him and talk a little bit longer. And when that happens every day, that man is becoming an informal mentor to that boy. Or the young girl who says hello to the teacher assistant every day. She's becoming an informal mentor to that girl, and building on those natural connections and the proximity, meaning they're there every day, gives them an opportunity to have a connection with school, and again, that feeling that someone will miss me if I'm not there. Now, one of the other things that's really important about school-based mentoring, it's also important for traditional mentoring, is to focus on the strengths-based language that we always encourage mentors to use with students around how they're doing. With chronic absenteeism, it's very easy for a mentor to say, we want you to have perfect attendance, but if a student is only coming to school 2 days a week, we might want to start with trying to get the student to come to school 3 days a week. Now, 3 days a week is not our ideal for every student, but of course, if a student is coming 3 days instead of 2 days, you've just increased their attendance by 50%. That's huge. And you can keep working towards a more regular attendance. And so using strength-based language to recognize improvement, even small steps, is really important for mentors in success mentoring, so that there's a recognition and acknowledgement, you're making progress and I'm proud of you for doing that. And especially for people running mentoring programs, we ask you to think about how can you model for your mentors this idea of using strength-based language to encourage them. Because if we're only going to give awards to the kids who are there 100% of the time, and I know lots of schools who give those awards, we're not going to be able to tackle the kids who are chronically absent, and we want them to come to school. We want them to have a regular time. So modeling that is really important. So the difference between the two types of school-based approaches is, one, there's a traditional model that looks more like a regular mentoring program that you might see outside a school setting, and then there's success mentors, which is focusing on chronic absenteeism and school engagement. Okay, so can we move to the next slide?
Okay, so how do we decide which mentor will be best equipped to build that strengths-based relationship that Jean referred to with their mentees? How do we decide which mentor will help which mentee in the best way? Matching is really part art and part science. What's important in matching is that you're considering which mentor will be the best person to help that youth cultivate their strengths and support them as they grow. So again, we're starting with the youth in mind. Can we click next so that all the characteristics show up? There we go, thank you. On the slide, you can see here that some of the criteria that you might consider when making matching decisions. You'll consider the interests of the mentor and the mentee. What do they like to do? What do they like to watch, play, or listen to? As Jean mentioned, proximity is really important, and availability as well. Mismatches with proximity and availability can present real tangible barriers to mentor and mentee actually getting together into the same physical space to meet. Gender, race, and ethnicity can also be important in a match, especially if those are strong aspects of the youth's self-identity. Personality can be important to consider as well. Would you match pairs with similar personalities or different personalities? Early in my career, I actually matched an extremely talkative, extroverted mentor to a quiet and introverted student. I was thinking that maybe the talkative mentor would bring the mentee out of her shell. Well, I can tell you that is not what happened. The mentor actually left little room for the mentee to use her voice, unfortunately. And I can see now that I was not using a strengths-based approach to make that match. I wasn't thinking about what the student wanted and needed. Instead, I was imposing what I thought the mentee needed onto the relationship, and I should have put more weight on what the mentee wanted. And that brings me to preferences. It's important to consider what the mentor, mentee, and when possible, what the parent wants for a match. If they present a bias against a type of person, you can ask why. You can say, can you tell me what you think it would be like to be matched with X, Y, or Z? And that can provide some additional information to use in the match. Now, which one of these matching characteristics do you think is the most important in making a great match? And use the chat box to let us know. Remember to send your chats to Delia.
Giving everyone a few minutes to chime in. Don't be shy. No responses yet, Abby. This might be a tough one for our participants.
Sure, I understand that. And the context of your program might also help dictate which one of these ends up being most important. The goals of your program, the context of your program. The science part of matching comes in. We talked about how matching is part art, part science, and here the science part comes in with two of these characteristics. So research has shown that matches that share common interests are more likely to be successful. You can imagine that this provides them with fuel for conversation, common ground that they can use to get more comfortable with each other, build their relationship, and grow. Research also tells us that it's important to have at least a 3-year age gap between mentor and mentee. This age gap helps the mentor have enough emotional space between them and the mentee to fully embody their mentor role as a guide and a role model, and not feel pressured to act more as a peer. This comes into play most frequently when we talk about peer mentoring programs. Goals, strengths, and previous experiences are all things that can provide additional insight into the mentor and the mentee's values, ability to build relationships, and the ability of that mentor to meet the needs and preferences of that student. But remember, there are no matching rules, only that you take these things into consideration along with the context of your program. Can we go to the next slide, please? So while it would be great to have an amazing algorithm that would take in all this data and spit out the best match for each mentor and mentee, we know that this does not exist. Within a school, there are a few practical ideas that can help you set up good matches. One idea is to build on the relationships that students already have in the school, as Jean mentioned earlier. It might be the security guard who sees the student come in late every day. It might be the gym teacher or the office receptionist. When students have an existing positive relationship with an adult at the school, they already have buy-in to the relationship. The initial work is already done. They know each other's names. They have some common experiences and a connection that they can build their mentoring relationship from. One way to find out where these connections are is by actually asking the students. You can ask them to list the top 3 adults who they connect with at the school. You could ask them in person, or in some cases, schools have surveyed students and asked them to list the top 3 people who they connect with at school. Another way to do this is to bring a list of students who need to be mentored to the next faculty meeting or staff meeting. And you can read off the list of kids, and mentors or adults can self-select based on their existing connections with kids as well. Next slide, please. Great, thank you. So now we're going to do a little matching activity. I hope y'all are paying attention. On this slide, we have 2 profiles of mentees and 2 profiles of mentors. So our first mentee is Sophia. Sophia is 12 years old. She's a new immigrant. She's had trouble adjusting to America and to middle school. Her mom thinks a mentor would help her daughter adjust. Our second mentee is Gina. Gina's 15 years old. She's moved a lot. She feels responsible for her younger siblings. She works part-time to support her family. She's bright, but she does not see a good future for herself. And now our first mentor is Alice. Alice is a retired nurse, a grandmother of 2. She does not have a car. She's active in church, wants to keep busy, and she does not have prior experience with mentoring. Imagine that Alice is also a longtime volunteer at the school. And our second mentor is Colleen. Colleen is a recent college graduate. She's got a new job with long hours. She has 2 younger brothers that she misses and loves social media. Imagine that Colleen is a new teacher at the school. Now take a minute and think about which mentor you would match with which mentee and why. And use the chat box to let us know.
All right, I'll be monitoring everyone's responses in the chat, so feel free to chime in if you have some insights you want to share. Looks like we're getting some thoughts. Someone says, definitely feeling like Colleen and Gina would be a good fit for each other. Another comment says that Alice could potentially work for Gina because Gina might appreciate having someone who has a really stable schedule, who she can rely on, considering everything that she has to deal with. Another person is thinking that Sophia might look up to Colleen and have an opportunity to build a connection with someone who's a little closer in age to her. Another person has said that Colleen and Gina would be a good fit for each other as well. And then we have another comment just about whether we would consider, this is more of a question, would we consider matching one of these mentors with both young people, or does it have to be one-on-one?
That's a great question. I think it really depends on the context of your program and the capabilities of the mentor, whether they're able to take on 2 mentees in this kind of a situation. But those are great answers. I love to hear the why behind why folks chose who they did. And remember, there are no right answers here. As long as you're considering the needs of the youth first, then you're on the right track. Next slide, please. So after you've picked great mentors for the youth in your program, it's time to consider how you'll initiate that relationship. So there are a few best practices that can help to guide those activities. One is that you have a deliberate, intentional start to the relationship where you connect mentor and mentee in person and acknowledge and celebrate the start of the mentoring relationship. When it's possible, you can invite the parent or the guardian to take part in that meeting. This is a great time to have some fun, and we'll have a few practical tips for you on the next slide on how to make this deliberate start to the relationship really fun. Another best practice is to make the expectations clear. Expectations are so critical to mentoring relationships. And you want to make those expectations clear with both mentor and mentee at the same time. It's recommended actually that they sign agreements that have the expectations written out. Things like how often they'll get together, if they need help, that they'll reach out and to whom, that they'll keep an open mind in the relationship, that they'll keep confidential things confidential, et cetera. And when you set those expectations straight while you're all there together in one place, then you can hold each other accountable. Next slide, please. So in the context of your program, think, what can we do at the first meeting to really start this off right? Making kids feel special and included and using activities that bring out their interests and strengths can engage students up front. These strengths-based fun activities can sometimes reduce that stigma that we find around mentoring. One example I've seen is where at the first meeting in a group setting, each mentor and each mentee gets a puzzle piece. And they try to fit their puzzle piece with each mentee or mentor in the room, and when they find the one that fits, that's their match. Another example is sending them on a scavenger hunt around the school, maybe sending each match out to look for 5 specific and interesting things about the school. or perhaps to give each match a passport with 12 different fun activities where they can earn stickers, little prizes, or even maybe extra privileges like extra library time or gym time for each activity completed. Introducing all the mentors and mentees together in one group can make for a great party. In fact, sometimes other students will pass by the party and say, I want to be in that group, and it might end up being a student recruitment tool for you. Another idea is to give them a jump start on finding commonalities. Have them tell each other or write down on a questionnaire what their favorite color, animal, food, sport, musician, etc., and see what they have in common, what they don't have in common, what they can learn from each other. Next slide, please. Great, so we've covered quite a bit, and would like to take some of your questions. So take a minute to type your questions into the chat box, and Delia will read them off for us.
Don't be shy. We definitely want to hear from you all about what is going on for you. What are you thinking about? What kinds of questions have come up on these topics of matching and initiation? I do already actually have one question for you guys. And this is just sort of on the broader topic of connecting mentors and mentees together. So what would you do if you think that a mentor and a mentee would be a good fit for each other? So if you think about those things that Abby went over and you feel good about them, but they just don't seem to get along after they're matched, how might you deal with that?
Well, this is Jean, and I would say that our recommendation is to not let people give up on each other too quickly. And we often ask for older kids, meaning not elementary school kids, to ask them to give the mentor a certain amount of time, a few weeks, and then talk to the mentor about how it's going and make sure that the mentor has the same expectations that you do and the student does for the match. So that you have to be careful, for example, that mentors don't come in thinking, oh, right, I have to save this young person and make sure they go to Harvard Medical School, even though they're only in 8th grade right now. So we have to manage a mentor's expectations about what this relationship is going to be like, what the expectation is for the mentor to do, for the student to do, and how we're going to measure success. So if we measure success by the strength of the friendship, we don't have to be talking about careers. We can be talking about baseball teams, fashion, lima beans, whatever is going to build our friendship. And so before I give up on a match, I ask the mentor to rethink what their expectations are and hopefully help reframe for them that they are making a connection. Because in fact, if the student is showing up for the mentoring meeting and the mentor is showing up for the mentoring meeting, you've made a lot of progress already, because it's hard for a student to start with a new adult. So as the coordinator, you can reframe that situation and help them give it a little more time to see if it really matches. If after a certain amount of time it's clear that it's not going to work, then you have to make sure you close it properly. And we'll be talking about closure, and there's a lot of information about closure in the Elements of Effective Practice. But I would not assume that you're going to hit that point, because most adults who want to help kids will understand that they're going to build a friendship wherever the student is, starting wherever the student is. Does that answer your question?
I think you hit the nail on the head there, Jean. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
And sort of a related question that's also here is, what would you do if you have a mentor that's really motivated to mentor, but they seem like they might not have the right perspective to mentor someone effectively?
Well, that's actually a really challenging question, because you have people with good hearts and they want to do good, but if they're not able to step back and meet the student where he or she is, that's just going to set it up to be one more experience that that student might feel that he or she has failed at. And many of the kids in these programs already have disappointed adults, or at least they think they have. So in some of those circumstances, I have encouraged mentoring program coordinators to have additional jobs to run their mentoring programs. no coordinator has enough time to do a great job. So a person who's really committed and wants to help but not the right personality, could they organize the holiday party? Could they organize a community service project where the mentors and mentees go to a local nursing home and plant a garden in the spring, or clean up a park? Are there other administrative areas that that volunteer who's energetic and wants to help could be useful at, maybe even recruiting new mentors, but not necessarily put them into a relationship? The last thing I'll say about it is, we work with 600 programs. They have 60,000 kids in them. It's generally the case, not always, that there's a self-selection process in volunteering to be a mentor. When you explain what you want a mentor to do, people who are not comfortable doing that will select themselves out. Not always, and you sometimes do have that, but there is a great ability to understand that that's not what I thought I was going to do, so I probably shouldn't volunteer.
Thank you. Thanks, Jean. And this is a question sort of to Abby's earlier story about the shy student that you had, who you matched with someone more talkative. Sort of related, this one says, I have a few teen students who are really shy and a bit disengaged, and I'm worried that they won't seem interested at their first meeting with their mentor, even though maybe they do want to be a part of the program. Do you have any tips for that kind of situation?
Yeah, absolutely. I think helping set expectations with the mentor about sort of what to expect during those first meetings. And I think to Jean's point earlier, too, we have to meet the kids where they are and really coaching mentors and helping to train them so that they aren't expecting the child to show up with, a bouquet of flowers and a big hug and, be completely excited and, obviously that's not going to happen. There's these little milestones that we look at as success, showing up for the meeting, making eye contact, maybe one smile, maybe a response that comes in a full sentence. Kids start at all different points, and so I think a lot of that comes in coaching and training of the mentor around their expectations and their recognition of what progress looks like.
That's great. Well, those are all of the questions that we have for right now. Unless other folks had additional ones, feel free to continue to type them in the chat box if you do. But Abby or Jean, I just wanted to see if either of you had anything else you wanted to share before we move on.
There are 2 points that I'm going to make about matching and initiation. The first one is when a mentor volunteers, they really want to help a child. That's why they volunteer in general. But it's a long time before they build a relationship with the child because maybe the child's shy as described, or maybe it's a little chaotic the first couple of meetings. And so the mentor may not feel connected to the young person. But through some research, it's been shown that mentors can feel a close connection to the program. That means the coordinators or the school or the people running it. And that connection will keep them motivated to keep coming back until the relationship with the young person has developed. And so that's an important thing to remember, that how you interact with the mentors as the coordinators, especially if you're using strength-based language and modeling it, we really appreciate your being here. We know you're going to make a difference. It may take a while, but this is going to be great. As you're doing that, they're going to feel valued and that what they are doing is important. And as time goes on, they will build a relationship with a young person, and that is what will keep them coming back for years. But in the beginning, what you're doing to connect them to your program is almost as important as they're developing the relationship with the young person. So that's the first thing you want to remember as you have to keep the mentors connected. And the second thing is sometimes people say to me, well, I shouldn't have to spend so much time with the mentors. They're adults. They should know what to do. But that's not true, because you're asking mentors probably to enter into a relationship they've never had before without a simple manual about how to do it, like you learn how to drive or what are the rules of the road. And so you do have to manage the adults just as well as the children. Adults can be discouraged, just like the children can be shy. And the role of the coordinator is to help them keep on with their work. It's just as important as helping the young people, because you want that match to survive for the benefit of the child. So do we have any other questions that we want to address here?
Yeah, actually there is one more question. The last question is, for success mentors who focus on attendance, are there any particular skills that a program coordinator should look for as they're recruiting those mentors?
Abby, what would you say to that? Do you have some suggestions?
I think it's all about building relationships. You know, like you said, Jean, I think it takes, we know the research tells us that the first year is all about building that strong relationship, and all of those positive outcomes comes from that.
So if some staff person doesn't relate to anybody in the building and is pretty shy, they might not be a good match, but still you might find that they're talking to another student who's also shy, and that might be the right match for them. So really looking at who can build the relationship, I think Abby's point is well taken to do that. I do encourage people to look for folks who are positive and can recognize small steps as progress. For many of these kids, it's hard to come to school every day because of all the other things going on in their lives. They're working, they're watching younger siblings, they take 3 buses to get to school. So celebrating when they're there only 5 minutes late instead of an hour late, you need somebody who can recognize that that's a big step forward. So a positive attitude is probably another good thing to look for.
Thank you so much, Jean, and thanks so much, Abby. Yeah, I think that's all we have for questions right now.
Okay. So if we can look at the next slide. So Abby and I have just pulled a few of the many things that Mentor, the National Mentoring Partnership, has put together, as well as the National Mentoring Resource Center and other places, about building long-lasting relationships and activities that can take place. These are all hyperlinks. If you click on them when you get this, slides, you'll be able to see these tools. Building long-lasting relationships talks from start to finish. The Young Men's Initiative is actually a group of activities collected for a mentoring program across many housing projects in New York City for middle school boys and young men of color. Tools for mentoring adolescents is just what it says. And then some of the things that lead to mentor satisfaction. And we want mentors to be satisfied, not because we're in the business of making mentors happy and not kids, but because we want mentors to feel satisfied so that they will continue that long relationship, because we know longer is stronger. These are just a few of the many resources that are available. At the end of the slides, you're going to see Mentor's website, where you'll find the National Center's website, Abby's and mine website as well. So you can access a lot of information. Okay.
Great.
Next slide.
So I just wanted to jump in here. Again, this is Delia Hagan from Mentor National. Before I give you some reminders to our participants today, I just really wanted to thank Abby and Jean for being on with us today. You guys have been real leaders in the Success Mentors mentoring movement, and we're just so lucky to have your expertise with us on this call to be able to share this with other schools and districts that are interested in doing this kind of work. So thank you for your insights. And their websites, as Jean mentioned, Mentor New York. Jean is the Executive Director of Mentor New York, and you can see that her organization's website is linked to on this slide deck, which you'll receive. And then the Mentoring Partnership and Resource Center, which is based in Philadelphia. Abby Ellis is the ED there, so you'll be able to check out her website as well. And then you'll see Mentor's website on that last bullet as well, and that is a good place for lots of different kinds of mentoring resources, as is the National Mentoring Resource Center. The bullet you'll see, the second from the bottom, that's an OJJDP-funded center that's all about mentoring. It's really for mentoring practitioners and coordinators, so if you are running a mentoring program at your school, you definitely want to check that out. It's got so many different no-cost tools and resources that you can access. And then, of course, we just want to put in a plug for the National Center, the National Student Attendance Engagement and Success Centers listserv. You'll be able to click this link here to receive those regular updates from the National Center and find out what other webinars you'll be able to access, so we definitely want to remind you about that. And I'm going bottom to top here, so the last thing I want to share in terms of a reminder is that we are actually offering another webinar tomorrow for mentoring coordinators and program managers who are doing these programs at the school and district level. And this is really digging into how to support the mentoring match. So once you've done the things that Abby and Jean have talked you through today, once you've matched them and once you've helped to initiate and kick off their match relationship, what do you do when challenges start to arise? How do you support them and make sure that they really have what they need to succeed in their relationship building? And so that is tomorrow at the same time. You'll see the times there in different time zones, and you can register on the link on this slide. It's actually the same link that you used to register for this webinar. You'll receive an email reminder one day before, so there's still time for you to go ahead and register for that. So that you can join us tomorrow for kind of a part 2 of this conversation. So thank you all as well for being with us. And if we can move to the next slide, I also want to share with you, we put together this webinar series not just for mentoring coordinators. This week is really focused on mentoring coordinators who are running these programs or managing these programs, but we also put together 2 webinars for mentors themselves. So if you want to leverage these webinars that we are doing next week with your mentors and actually, use them to help train your success mentors or your school mentors on how to support students, we really encourage you to share this information with them. Again, it's the same registration link you used to join us today, but you could have them register for Mentoring 101, which is really sort of a basic introduction to mentoring skills as they relate to success mentors or school integrated mentoring programs like the ones we're talking about today. And then there's a 201, sort of a level 2, talking about how can mentors overcome some common challenges that arise in relationships. So we really want to support you in training and orienting your mentors, and we hope that these webinars will help with that. They'll also be recorded so you can share them with your mentors at another time if next week just doesn't work for you. So I think that's all I wanted to share before I go ahead and transition back to Veronica from the National Center.
Sure, thank you, Delia. And if you'll look at your chat box, I did just send everyone the website, the temporary national centers where we're housing our information for the time being until we can get our full website launched. All of our information and all of our webinar recordings are currently being stored on the Everyone Graduates website, which is part of Johns Hopkins University. So I sent you all the URL to access that site, and as Delia mentioned, there are a ton of previous webinars on there, and we'll also be we'll be posting this recorded webinar to that site, as well as tomorrow's webinar and both webinars next week as well. So if you have folks that are interested but are unable to attend, there is the website where they can access those recordings. So with that, I want to thank everybody for attending today. I hope you found the information helpful and informative. We will be emailing the webinar recording to all of you within the next few days. And please do keep an eye out for any emails about the website and the center. As Delia mentioned, there is a link a couple of slides back that allow you to register for the National Center listserv. And we do issue quarterly newsletters with information about our events and our upcoming webinars and any new news that we have to release. So that would put you on the listserv to receive that information. So unless anybody has any final questions or comments, I want to thank our presenters today as well as Delia from Mentor. We hope to see all of you folks back tomorrow and next week. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.